and welcome. My name is Dr. Deborah Joy Perez, Assistant Vice President for Research and Evaluation at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Welcome to the Diversity Matters podcast series. Diversity and inclusion are core values of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, reflected in our principles. We value differences among individuals across multiple dimensions, including, but not limited to, race, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, physical ability, religion, and socioeconomic status. We believe that the more we include diverse perspectives and experiences in our work, the better able we are to help all Americans live healthier lives and get the care they need. In service to our mission, we pledge to promote these values in the work we do and to reflect on our progress regularly. Now I'd like to introduce you to the podcast host, Jacinta Gauda, who is the diversity liaison for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Human Capital team.
Hello, I'm Jacinta Gauda, your host for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Diversity Matters podcast series. In these conversations, we talk with funders and grant makers and leaders and subject matter experts on practical ways of increasing representation in philanthropy, research, academia, and healthcare. I invite all of our listeners to become members of the Diversity Matters community and to join this conversation on diversity and inclusion. Our guests today are Dr. Mark Nivet, Chief Diversity Officer of the Association of American Medical Colleges, and Dr. Dave Brunson, Senior Director at the Policy Center, Access, Diversity, and Inclusion at the American Dental Education Association. We are here today with Dr. Nivet and Dr. Brunson to discuss holistic review, an innovative practice that aligns admission policies and processes and criteria with institution-specific goals, and how this holistic review practice can be beneficial in increasing diversity. Dr. Nivet is Chief Diversity Officer for the Association of American Medical Colleges. He has worked to bring diversity alongside talent management and strategic planning as a recognized driver of organizational transformation and performance improvement, and to link diversity to the overall mission of producing better health outcomes for all. Dr. Nivet currently serves in an advisory capacity for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's New Careers in Nursing Scholarship Program and the American Dental Education Association's Commission on Change and Innovation in Dental Education. Dr. Dave Brunson is Senior Director of the Policy Center, Access, Diversity, and Inclusion at the American Dental Education Association. He is Co-Deputy Director of the Summer Medical and Dental Education Program funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and serves as a consultant to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Pipeline Initiative to increase minority presence in dental schools. Dr. Brunson also coordinates the Academic Dental Careers Fellowship Program, an initiative to increase the number of dental and allied dental students pursuing careers as dental faculty. Mark and Dave, thank you for joining us on Diversity Matters.
Thank you, Jacinta. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes, really am looking forward to this. Thank you, Jacinta.
Well, let's start with you, Mark. Tell us, describe what holistic review is for our listeners.
Well, the AAMC defines holistic review as a flexible way of assessing an applicant's capabilities by which balanced consideration is given to experiences, attributes, and academic metrics, and when considered in combination, how the individual might contribute value as a medical student and a future physician. Holistic review is an admissions process that allows us to dig deeper into the background of the individual to ensure not only that he or she has the academic readiness to be successful in medical school, but has the personality and drive and ability to comport him or herself in a manner that is consistent with being a culturally competent physician. Because applicants are future practitioners, it really matters that they exhibit qualities like empathy and humanism and are not solely good performers on exams. Holistic admission practices and processes are grounded in institutional mission and goals, applied equitably across the entire applicant pool, built into every stage in the admission cycle, screening, interviewing, and selection, used to promote diversity broadly defined as essential to institutional excellence, strategically applied and regularly informed by ongoing evaluation, making them more readily adaptable and reflective of the evolving institutional goals and priorities. Right now, much of holistic review occurs during the interview stage, but the key is applying it during the screening stage before interview candidates are identified. This is a critical opportunity to get beyond what's written on paper and to really understand the background of the individual under consideration. Adhering to the principles of holistic review requires us to reimagine our application process from scratch, especially with regards to the content of secondary applications which explore an applicant's personal journey, motivations, and professional goals.
Thank you, Mark. Now that we know a little bit about what holistic review is, can you tell us what it is not?
That's a good question. Holistic review is clearly not affirmative action, nor is it solely a diversity initiative. Plainly stated, it is a better way to do admissions that engages admissions committee members, deans, and staff in assessing the full range of what each applicant might contribute to the learning environment. As an individual and a member of a learning cohort, and to medicine or dentistry, academic readiness and academic metrics matter, but they don't tell us the whole story of an applicant.
Well, thank you for this important clarification. Take us back a bit. What is the history of holistic review?
Well, holistic review has its roots in the simulated minority admissions exercise, which actually began in the 1970s as an exploration of strategies to train admissions officers to look beyond academic metrics and value diversity when evaluating applications. This was followed in the 1990s by the expanded admissions medical exercise, which, like its predecessor, was explicitly focused on racial and ethnic diversity and worked to expand awareness of the full range of experiences and attributes that diverse applicants bring to the educational environment. It started with a recognition that the only way to really diversify medical school classes was to get beyond looking at the very narrow definition of success and thinking of qualification for medical schools in a much broader context. What distinguishes these early movements from holistic review is that these were explicitly diversity-building activities, not framed as a way to do better admissions. What we're doing with Holistic Review Project is to fundamentally shift that discussion. Framing holistic review as a diversity effort makes it really easy for someone to say, that's not my job. It's much harder to say anything that has to do with selecting future graduates isn't our job. The admissions initiative in its current incarnation emerged out of the Grutter decision from the Supreme Court and the need for institutions for a stronger set of admission tools that facilitate a holistic consideration of each applicant.
Well, thank you. It has evolved, hasn't it?
Sure
Let's
has.
talk a little bit about the benefits, both to the educational environment and to the long-term delivery of health care, of adopting holistic review as an admissions practice.
Holistic review is fundamentally about giving institutions an expanded set of tools to recruit, select, and matriculate the students it wants to educate and the physicians it wants to graduate. It's not just about finding students who can graduate medical school or dental school, but those that have the capability to serve and practice medicine or dentistry in the healthcare system of the future, with an emphasis on cultural and linguistic competence. It provides benefit not just to the individual student who's accepted, not just to the minorities or students who, based on MCAT scores alone, may not have been viewed as primary candidates. It is also a benefit to all students in the class because, as we know, bringing in people with diverse backgrounds and experiences and perspectives helps the educational process and allows all students to be better future practitioners. The higher education literature documents the effects of diverse and inclusive environments on teaching and learning, which include the development of critical thinking skills, countering of negative stereotypes, improved understanding of multiple perspectives, and the ability to deal with conflicts that sometimes arise from differences. We propose that exposing students to backgrounds and perspectives different from their own has direct effects on practice decisions, whom they treat and serve, how they interact with patients, families, communities, and their health colleagues, their cultural competency and humility, That said, we're still in the early stage of assessing the longitudinal impact of holistic admissions on both teaching and learning and practice healthcare outcomes. Part of this requires implementing better methods for assessing the attitudes, competencies, and practice orientations of physicians as they change over time.
Thank you for that explanation. How does holistic review help to increase diversity and inclusion in academia, research, and healthcare?
We know that increasing diversity, especially as it relates to individuals from racial and ethnic backgrounds historically underrepresented in higher and medical education, doesn't just happen by chance. To many, inequities in educational access and other cumulative disadvantages remain as a barrier to a fair representation of minorities in medicine and dentistry. Achieving a critical mass of diversity in the healthcare professions requires that we link workforce diversity to institutional excellence and mission fulfillment. Rather than relying on a handful of traditional mental models of what defines a successful applicant, holistic review challenges us to broaden the lens and consider the full range of experiences, attributes, and academic metrics an applicant brings to the table, and how the applicant might contribute to the excellence in education, research, and clinical care. The AAMC's Holistic Review Project has developed a model of multiple dimensions of diversity to help institutions identify for themselves, within the experiences, attributes, academic metrics framework, what dimensions of diversity are most relevant and compelling for their context and mission. That said, simply admitting a more diverse student body won't automatically result in a more inclusive culture and climate. In order to fully realize the value of holistic admissions, active, intentional, coordinated work needs to be done across the medical education continuum to ensure every individual is valued, respected, and engaged.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about this practice and how it has been received. How has the practice of holistic review been received among admission professionals? Have there been any early adopters, and if so, are they showing positive results?
It's a great question. Overall, the reception has been very positive. Traction only continues to grow, and we hear more and more interest from schools every week. Participating in the Holistic Review and Admissions Workshop isn't a direct correlate with doing Holistic Review, but is indicative of interest. As of today, we've conducted workshops at 43 medical schools. Over 75% have rated it as an exceptional investment, and the investment has been quite extensive considering they commit to bring 30 to 40 of their core faculty members together in the room for hours of intensive training. The AAMC plans to administer a survey in early 2013 to assess the state of holistic review in U.S. medical school admissions. We know schools are in a wide range of stages in terms of implementing holistic review. We also know that there is still a wide range of interpretations as to what holistic review actually is, hence the development of the AAMC definition and the 4 core principles. Among early adopters, we've seen initial reports of positive impacts in terms of where physicians are practicing and populations they are serving. There are also some schools that report anecdotal success in terms of seeing their students interact more across dimensions of difference, stronger community orientation, and an increasing interest and capacity in cultural and linguistic competence.
Thank you. That sounds promising. You mentioned the importance of linking holistic review to the institutional mission. Talk a little bit more about that importance.
Well, admissions is a core function of the medical school, and with few exceptions, the entry point into the profession of medicine. It's fair to say that it's good practice for your mission, value, and goals as an institution to inform the selection of the students you want to educate and the physicians you want to graduate. Also, it's a significant undertaking in terms of investment of human capital and other resources, including time. Why expend the energy and investment if you aren't going to link to the core values of your institution?
Thank you for stressing the importance of that linkage. There are a lot of misunderstandings about changes to admission standards. How often do you hear that issue raised? What is the chief objection or concern you hear in regard to holistic review?
Well, the biggest pushback that we hear is that it's difficult. It's time-consuming. It requires more effort. Sometimes here it's not as efficient as simply using a numeric cutoff. It requires that you ask more of your applicants and process that information. It requires more commitment from admissions committees. It requires that you spend time thinking about the mission of your institution and tailoring the selection of applicants to meet that mission. Asking who we are and why we're here. What are we trying to accomplish? And how does the medical or dental student body contribute to the fulfillment of that mission? And making those strategic inquiries is time-consuming, critical, but time-consuming. At a time when there are 3 qualified applicants for every available medical slot, it's challenging to see the rationale for the extra time investment. But the question has to be, what qualities in students are going to translate into physicians that can and want to serve the way we want and need them to serve the patients of the future? In this respect, I don't think there's a major pushback, but there certainly is a challenge. I haven't come across anyone who is against holistic review or doesn't support the premise, but the complaint is that it becomes difficult to have the vision and drive to change how things have been done for so many years. Change is hard. There isn't a lack of will to do it, but we need to continue to develop and promote the use of tools that allow the principles of holistic review to be implemented in an efficient manner. The other issue that comes up all too often is the holistic review is just a code word for lowering standards. On the contrary, it's directly tied to excellence, to selecting students who will help the institution meet its mission and embody its values and vision.
Well, thank you. Change is hard, Dr. Nivet, and let's talk about some of the prerequisites that must be in place for holistic review to be successful.
Well, in order to achieve long-term benefits, holistic review needs to be aligned with the other core functions and practices of the institution. If what you're looking for as you recruit students doesn't map to what you're selecting for in applications, there's a problem. If you're bringing in more students from financially disadvantaged backgrounds but not changing your approach to financial assistance or student support, then you probably aren't going to see the results you're looking for. Just admitting a more compositionally diverse class does not automatically result in a more inclusive culture and climate. It takes intentional, ongoing effort across the institution in order to leverage the deeper learning and teaching opportunities available through holistic admissions. On a more practical note, it's impossible to accomplish this change without buy-in from leadership and the appropriate commitment of time, staff, and other resources.
Well, thank you. Is there any advice? What advice would you give to admissions professionals who are interested in implementing holistic review? Are there specific steps that they should take?
Well, we've got a lot of material developed through the Holistic Review Project. I'd recommend that they take advantage of these materials and workshops, which are suitable to all admissions audiences, not just medical or dental admissions committees. I would also recommend that they engage with colleagues who have begun the process at their institutions and seek insight and advice before embarking on the work at their own institutions. Most importantly, don't take the process lightly. It is a big undertaking. The AMC stands ready to support you, and I personally would make myself available as a sounding board and resources to those interested in implementing holistic review to increase the diversity at their institutions.
Dr. Nivet, thank you so much for giving us a grounding in this important subject of holistic review. And before we go on to our second segment and hear from Dr. Dave Brunson, do you have any final thoughts?
I make the point that successive holistic review and pipeline efforts are interdependent. The number of diverse applicants in the pool remains too small, and we've got to do more to increase the number by reaching out and developing talent early on. For the process to realize the greatest possible benefits, health profession schools can't simply be the passive recipients of the applicant pool, but must engage in developing the talent further upstream. It's not sufficient to offer basic science enrichment courses. We should also be exposing potential future applicants to the concepts of population health, to all types of existing and emerging health-related careers, so that we're preparing the well-rounded future physicians and dentists we are seeking. The crux of this will be connecting the community and building capacity within the K-12 system to really create the clinicians of the future. Finally, I'd really just like to thank my colleague Amy Adams, who spent a lot of time thinking about holistic review and works closely with me on the holistic review process.
Dr. Nivet, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on holistic review and helping our listeners understand what it is and what it is not, and how it can be beneficial to not only advancing the mission of an organization or an institution, but also in impacting diversity in a positive way. We're going to go on to our second segment of Holistic Review with Dr. Dave Brunson shortly. Welcome to the second segment of Holistic Review with Dr. David Brunson, Senior Director, Policy Center, Access, Diversity, and Inclusion, the American Dental Education Association. Welcome, Dr. Brunson.
Thank you.
Dr. Brunson, early in this podcast, Mark Nivet gave us a big picture of holistic review. Can you add some detail about the practice for our listeners today?
Mark provided an excellent description of holistic review, and all that I can add is that in practice, it takes a great deal of planning and work. Most admissions committees will say they are doing holistic review, but usually that review only will come after there has been some reduction of applications to be considered for interviews, either by having a grade point and or test score minimums. Holistic review, properly utilized, must include full review of all applications, not just the ones left after a cut.
Dr. Brunson, what are some of those common misunderstandings regarding holistic review that you come up against, and how do you overcome these misunderstandings?
The most common statements I hear is that doing holistic review takes too long and involves too much work. And besides, the way we have been doing it has worked extremely well over many years. We have seen very many creative ways of handling a large number of applications and applying good holistic admissions principles. I've seen a number of admissions committees after participating in an admissions committee workshop. These are available from AAMC and from ADIA. Make the necessary commitment and changes to introduce holistic review into their admissions process.
Thank you, Dave. Talk a little bit to our listeners who are interested in practical how-tos of holistic review. What do you need to do to promote holistic review within an institution? How do you get administrative buy-in?
That's a great question. We have found that buy-in and promotion in an institution is really a top-down process. If the dean and the institutional leadership are not on board, very little change in the admissions process will take place. I must also say that the institutions which have demonstrated good change to their admissions process and increased diversity have had a passionate leader in admissions, either at the admissions dean level or a member of the admissions committee. The holistic review must begin by focusing on the mission of the institution, and that mission must emphasize the need to have a diverse student body, faculty, and staff. A number of new accreditation standards surrounding diversity have been developed and implemented in medical and dental education, and are also becoming a driver for institutions to look at their admissions processes. When the admissions process at an institution can demonstrate the changes necessary to implement holistic review and document the expected outcomes from those changes, administrative buy-in will take place.
Thank you, Dr. Brunson, and also for mentioning the importance of leadership commitment and the ability to document the expected outcomes of the changes. Talk a little bit about the results so far. Holistic review is fairly young as an admissions practice. So what results have you seen so far?
Well, as Mark mentioned, holistic review actually has been around for a number of years. In dentistry, at one point around the early 1980s, when the number of applications were down, admissions committees were reviewing all of the applications that were received, which is one of the premises of holistic review. They had to fill their classes. The attention to holistic review now, I think, has come from the changes at institutions when mission statements changed to focus on the importance of having a very diverse student body, and with the recent introduction of accreditation standards for diversity. Many schools are asking AAMC and ADIA to please help them with their admissions process and to present an admissions committee workshop. In dentistry, we have seen a significant increase in the percentage of enrollment of students from diverse backgrounds and those who come from historically underrepresented races and ethnicities into first-year classes at dental schools, which have hosted an ADIA admissions committee workshop. Since 2004, when the ADIA admissions committee workshop began, 34 of the 61 dental schools have participated, and all have had an increase in enrollment of underrepresented students above their original level before the workshop.
Well, take us inside the workshop, Dr. Brunson. Please describe your admissions workshop to our listeners, and who takes the workshop and why?
Well, the ADEA Admissions Committee workshop and the AAMC workshop, which Mark mentioned, are very similar in content and format. Since I'm more closely aligned with the ADEA workshop, I'll focus on it. ADEA offers the workshop at no cost to the institution. The dental institution will ask for the workshop, and the workshop date is established. Usually, the institution will indicate they are interested in looking at their admissions process and the changes necessary to increase diversity at their school. The workshop is 4 hours in length, and the presence of the dean, the administrative leadership, the admissions dean and staff, the admissions committee, and anyone else who is involved in the admissions process is required. The workshop is led either by 2 members of the ADEA staff or 2 members of a group of 10 trained ADEA Admissions Committee workshop facilitators. The outline of the workshop is this. The first topic is welcome, introduction, and workshop outcomes. Then we look at what we look for in a successful applicant, both the institutional values and individual values. We look at present admissions climate, why is diversity important, diversity and the law. And then we go into what are dental admissions committees doing. We have an ADEA admissions survey, we have previous admissions committee workshop outcomes, and we look at what doesn't work and what does, and what changes have to be made. And then we go into a topic of whole file review, tips for implementation, followed by using non-cognitives and MMI interviews and how do you quantify those. Then we go to what constitutes success, and then we have conclusions. After the conclusion of the workshop, the facilitators offer to stay in touch with the participants for consultations in the future.
Thank you. It's pretty thorough and rigorous, this process. Talk a little bit about what changes. How does this practice really change the traditional admissions process?
Well, what we are seeing is that institutions that review their admissions process and make the necessary changes will demonstrate an increase in the admissions of a more diverse student body. There definitely is less emphasis on grades and test scores and more focus on the pathway the student has journeyed to reach this point in his or her life. Additionally, although in some years the institution may demonstrate up and down percentages of enrollment, they never go back to the original level unless we have seen a change in the deanship or in the admissions team.
Thank you. Let's go on and talk a little bit about the implementation of this holistic review practice. Are there parts of the practice that are more difficult to implement than others?
Well, I feel it's a tremendous challenge to review all applications that are submitted to an institution. Many institutions are being very creative in their drive to make this happen. Additionally, getting an admissions committee to grasp the changes to the process is difficult when the present process creates a class that is successful in completing their education, when the emphasis has been on taking those with the highest grades and test scores. The fear is, if someone is taken with lower grades and test scores, that person will have more difficulty in completing the educational experience. We have not found that to be true. Taking the time to review whether a candidate is a first-generation college student, whether they come from an educational background that did not have the advantage of AP or accelerated courses, the level of the applicant's parents' education, and any challenges to the applicant's education, such as working while going to school, are all factors that are important in the holistic process.
Thank you, Dave. Let's talk about one of the challenges challenges that you mentioned. Can you take us through how do you help an admission staff a member to meet that particular challenge?
I think, as I've mentioned a number of times, the most difficult challenge is reviewing all of the applications that are submitted to the school. In present practices, it's not uncommon for the review process to be accomplished by the admissions staff only after there has been a cut made based on grades and test scores. Most admissions directors are now asking more people to review applications, so there is a way to review all. The more people involved in the review process, the more applications can be reviewed. It is important, though, that all reviewers go through a training and standardization process to make sure that all applications are reviewed in the same way.
Thank you. What do you hear, Dr. Brunson, from recruiters and admission officers and other professionals who attend your workshop on the subject of recruiting candidates from underrepresented groups?
In general, I think the recruiting of candidates from underrepresented groups has already seen changes over the years. It is the process of review to allow more applicants to be considered for an interview that is the critical piece. As I mentioned before, those schools that have participated in workshops have seen an increase in enrollment of students from underrepresented groups. They see that the changes in the process that allows review of all applications will provide a group of students who are more diverse, still well qualified, and are excellent students once they have matriculated.
Dr. Brunson, after participants finish the workshop, how difficult is it for them to go back to their institutions and implement holistic review? And what advice do you give them?
Well, we receive very positive feedback from the admissions officers and workshop attendees. They generally find that many changes are considered and implemented after the workshops. I advise them to be diligent and that change takes time. But generally they will see improved results almost immediately. I also remind them that they cannot rest. It is very easy to go back to old ways. Think about it. It's much easier to have an admissions process that just looks at grades and test scores and takes the top students than one that requires intensive review and choosing a candidate based on many criteria. We have seen a number of schools that made very positive changes lose an admissions officer or a dean and then struggle to regain the same level of passion for maintaining a holistic approach to admissions.
Thank you very much. For our listeners today, Dr. Brunson, what advice would you give our listeners who are considering implementing a holistic review admissions process at his or her institution?
I think it's really critical to have training on the holistic review process. That can be secured by attending an admissions committee workshop or by reviewing the materials that are available on the AAMC and ADIA website on holistic review. Also, there are many individuals at AAMC and ADIA that are involved in the holistic review process who are willing to discuss, recommend, or provide advice to individuals who are considering or dealing with many of the issues that come up when considering changing an admissions process.
Dr. Brunson, thank you so much for helping us see some of the implementation challenges and opportunities with holistic review, taking us into that training program. And any final thoughts, Dr. Brunson, before we close our podcast today?
I would just say, do not give up. Change takes time and much effort and support, but it is worth it. It has been very rewarding to see the institutions that have made the decision to change, have made the changes, and are seeing the outcome in having an increasingly diverse student body.
Dr. Brunson, thank you again for sharing your perspective on holistic review and helping us understand how to put this practice into place. Mark and Dave, thank you again for speaking with us about holistic review and about what institutions can do to increase diversity among medical and dental students and support a healthcare profession equipped to meet the challenges of ensuring excellent, equitable care for all Americans. I'm Jacinta Gauda, inviting all members of the Diversity Matters community to join this conversation. As a community member, you can download this podcast or request a one-page summary of today's discussion. You could post your comments and questions, as well as tips about the diversity and inclusion measures that have been helpful within your organization. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're not a member of the Diversity Matters community, please take a moment to join today. Go to community.rwjf.org so that you can participate in this important conversation. I'd like to remind all of our listeners to sign up for notifications for our next podcast in the series on practical ways to increase diversity and inclusion in philanthropy, research, healthcare, and academia. And especially thank you to Dr. Nivet and Dr. Brunson for sharing the innovative practice of holistic review with our listeners today.